Hi, welcome to Sweden again. Today I want to show you this vehicle, which has a very special place in my heart. The Volvo 912, as it was called in the Swedish Army. It has followed me during the entire career, and it's a lovely vehicle to drive, and I will take you for a spin later in this video, and so nice to drive. But we will begin during the Second World War, when the Swedish Army didn't have that many vehicles that could travel off-road. They were pretty much ordinary trucks, ordinary cars, and they were depending on the roads. So after the Second World War, they realized we need to have something better. And a very quick and simple solution was, in fact, to buy surplus vehicles from the US. Loads of them were available in Europe, and they bought many GMC trucks, Dodge weapon carrier, Brockway trucks, etc. So they had a load of these vehicles that was brought to Sweden quite cheap after the Second World War, 1946-47. And they became quite large majority of the Swedish Army vehicles for a quite long period of time. But there was also a need for more modern and more specialized vehicles. So in the early 1950s, Volvo got the task to develop a new 6x6 truck. And they have proved that they could, since during the Second World War, they made a lot of different vehicles, trucks that was quite capable. So they got the task, 6x6 truck, and this is the result. The TL22, which is the Volvo designation, and in the Swedish Army it was Lastterrängbil 912. The majority of these trucks were the standard lorry, but they also made a few other variants. One for fire rescue for the Air Force, based on the same chassis. Two different command vehicles, one for the Army and one for the Coast Guard. And they also made a shorter variant with only 2 axles. Open top, but basically the same components used as a tow truck for the Air Force. Based on the same components, and in total they made 857 between 1954 and 1959. These vehicles became a workhorse, and they were used almost everywhere in different units for different tasks. And I have been trying to figure out why did they make this vehicle, for what purpose, and the answer seems to be we need a vehicle like this for everything use. So it wasn't really specified to be able to do exactly this. It was a standard vehicle that the Army wanted, and it was used almost everywhere. In the infantry, to carry soldiers on the flatbed, you could combine doing different configurations depending on how you would like to use the vehicle, if transporting soldiers or transporting goods. This 6x6 truck has all-wheel drive. It has also differential locks to get better traction. And the engine is a 6-cylinder 4.7 liter petrol engine, 115 horsepower. Manual gearbox, and it's no synchronization in it, so it's well, for the soldiers back then it was no problem to drive it, but for the soldiers that came later that wasn't used to that kind of gearbox, it was quite tricky to drive, and I will show you later how to do it. The weight of the vehicle is 4,000 200 kilos, and you can carry 1,500 kilos of goods, soldiers or whatever you want to carry. Top speed 75 kilometers an hour. They were used from the mid-1950s till the late 1970s, when they were replaced by more modern vehicles. And the majority of them were sold out in the 1980s. But some of them were kept as training vehicles until the mid-1990s. Training vehicles for what? Well, for the drivers of the Centurion tanks. The Centurion tanks has a manual gearbox without synchronization, and in order to teach the young soldiers who had never seen such a gearbox, this was a really great help to use, because it has the same type of gearbox. So you can train on this one, you can sit beside the driver, teach him how to do it, and then in the tank it was a bit more easy to understand how to drive the Centurion tank. Myself, when I was trained on the Centurion tank, I didn't need to use this one because I already knew how to drive a vehicle without synchronized gearbox. It's a special skill you need to have, and it's quite fun to do it, not using the clutch at all. When these vehicles were sold out and civilians bought them, a lot of them, they realized the fuel consumption of this petrol engine was enormous. So they put diesel engines in instead because they thought that was more economic. And for me, that's insane. You lose all the fun. The fun is to have the original engine with the petrol engine. And the fuel consumption, well, if you drive 5 to 10 kilometers a year, who cares of the fuel consumption? It's the fun to drive it. On the earlier surplus vehicles from the US, often the winch was at the front, and they realized, well, that's probably not the best solution to have the winch. So on this and many other vehicles that we used in the army, the winch is on the side, so you can use it in both directions. And this is something that you really need to have out in the wilderness. And we used this winch a lot, not to get the vehicle out of any problems, because this is probably one of the best off-road vehicles that you can ever find. It's absolutely fantastic. So you doesn't really need the winch for rescuing yourself, but it's handy to have to rescue other one. And we also used it for when we changed tracks on the Centurion tanks. We used the winch to pull the tracks, etc. So it's you can use it to a lot of things. On the inside, there is a very nice communication system for the people in the cabin to the people back here. And this is high-tech. The hose, where you can talk to the people back there. Ho ho! And they answer on the other side. Very useful, and it doesn't need any battery, so it works everywhere. Back in the 1970s, a lot of people were smoking, and one of the main attractions was ho ho, and the guy lifts this up, and all of a sudden he has to the guys on the other side. And if you're not smoking, that's not so nice to have in the face. It works. In modern cars, you have electric motors for the window. In the old times, there was a cranking up and down the window, pretty normal. But in this one, it's a bit strange, since in less than half a turn, you raise and lower the window. And there's a lot of people, including myself, been sitting on the inside and having the head out, and then you knock yourself in the chin with it. Well, it hurts. And done it, been there, and I guess a lot of people who have used this vehicle have done the same. Quick but painful. And the rear part, you can carry goods, or you can sit on the sides for just transporting people. But if you need to use it as infantry units, you want to dismount pretty quick. So in that case, you can rearrange. So you put the sides of the vehicle on here, and you create benches to sit on, so you can face to the outside, and when dismounting you can do it pretty quickly instead of using the rear door. So it's capable to do almost anything, and it's a very practical vehicle for many cases, and we used it a lot during my times in the army. The other side of the communication system. And up here there's a hole in the roof, so you can have one person standing up there as a guard for enemy aircrafts. So you can climb up here. So this is the position for watching out for enemy aircrafts. Of course, you could carry a rifle if you wanted, but that was not the intended task. It was just to be able to watch out and to warn the driver, enemy aircraft, take cover! And that was something that was used in many vehicles in the Swedish Army during the 1950s, 60s and 70s. Until we realized that the best way to avoid spotting by aircraft was just to stop and stand still, not the moving. In order to show you the underside of the vehicle, we have tilted. And here you can see the engine at the front with the gearbox and the transfer case. The front axle and the two rear axles. From the gearbox, there's a propeller shaft into the transfer case, and from the transfer case, there is one for the front axle and two for the different rear axles. The winch on this vehicle is on the side, and there is a propeller shaft for that directly from the gearbox. Now out in the open, and we are going to take this lovely beast for a spin. There's a lot of buttons and levers like in all cars, and it's lovely. Here's the pedals for the front axle drive, high-low range, gear lever, handbrake, and these are for the differential locks, which are operated from vacuum from the carburetor, but we don't need them today. So we hope for the best. The lovely sound of the 6-cylinder petrol engine. When you're driving this vehicle, you need to use the clutch pedal twice when changing gears, because there's no synchronization. It's a crash box, as people call them, both up and down. So it's a bit different from an ordinary normal car today. When you get used to it, it's quite nice, and you need to let things calm down a bit to not to have all this scary sounds from the gearbox. And normally you can start on second gear, even if it's uphill, it's no problem in second gear. It's also very important not to have your thumbs on the inside of the steering wheel, since when the wheel is spinning when you're driving in the train, you can easily knock your thumbs off. So you have to keep them on the outside. And when changing down, you need to have a bit of gas, accelerator. In this vehicle you have a normal 4-speed gearbox with this lever, but there is also a high-low range, so you can actually in practical terms you have eight gears. So depending on if it's on road, you are driving on high range, and if it's out in the terrain off-road, you use the low range. And in low range it's a bit slower and you get more power to the wheels. And the third lever is for connecting or disconnecting the front axle. Normally you only have the rear axles engaged, and if you are driving on slippery roads or out in a terrain off-road, you need to have the front axle as well. In an ordinary car, when you are shifting gears, you press the clutch pedal and you put it into gear and then off you go. So that's the normal procedure when you're driving a normal modern car, where you have the synchronization rings in the gearbox. But an old car like this one doesn't have that synchronization system in the gearbox, so you have to use a different technique to be able to shift from one gear to another. And this synchronization system that came pretty early in the 1930s, or maybe even earlier than that, and many trucks, all cars from the past, you have to use this technique because there are no synchronization in the gearbox. So it depends on what kind of vehicle it is. And to do this with a gearbox which has no synchronization, you have to do it a bit different. So this is how to do it. You depress the clutch pedal and wait a while before you can use the first gear. You release the clutch pedal and use the accelerator for the movement, and off you go as in a normal car. To shift, to change gear, you have to do a bit different from the ordinary car. So you depress the clutch pedal, put the gear lever in neutral and let go of the clutch pedal. And then you depress once more before you put in the next gear, so you can continue. And this is why you have to do this, is because the engine revolution and the gearbox revolution, when they are turning, they are using different speeds, so you need to find where they are, well, more or less the same speed. So by doing this, you with the double clutch you get them into a better position so they can grab in. Otherwise one gear will turn and the other one will be more or less static, so it will not be able to get it into the teeth so they grab into each other. The press, put into gear, the press, neutral, the press, and next gear. That's how you do it from a lower to a higher gear if you're going up in speed. And to do it reverse, to go down in speed or to a lower gear, you have to add one thing to this, and that's the accelerator pedal that's used. So if you're going from second gear to first, you use the clutch pedal into neutral, and before you put the gear into the first, you need to rev the engine a bit with the accelerator in order to get a bit more speed on the engine. So you depress the accelerator a bit and then depress the clutch pedal and into gear. So shifting up, you only use the clutch pedal twice, and shifting down, you use the clutch pedal once, accelerator, and then clutch pedal once again. So this is the way how to do it, and every vehicle, they are a bit different, and you need to be familiar with the vehicle that you're driving, how it behaves, and you have to be a bit more focused on the driving and to look out if it's going uphill or downhill or a normal road. Depends in how quick you need to be on changing, or a bit more weight before you do it, and that's something that you need to get the feeling of the vehicle and to learn how this vehicle is behaving. So if you know how to do it, you can use it in almost every vehicle, but it can be more or less easy to do it. Otherwise you will have this scaring sound like in some movies when people are trying to change gears and it doesn't work. So you need to do the double clutching. And in some cases you have to reverse and do it once more. So if you're going from fourth to third and it doesn't work, then you might have to go up to fourth again and start from the beginning and do it another time to be able to get it into gear again. So that's how to do the double clutch driving on this kind of vehicle. When changing down, you need to use the accelerator to get the engine and gearbox to spin at the same speed. Otherwise it's almost impossible to change gears. And when you get the hang of this double clutch driving, it's a lovely thing to use, and those old cars, they are so fantastic to drive. What a fantastic vehicle to drive. The Volvo 912. one of the best off-road vehicles in the world. Always debatable, but I love this car. If you like our YouTube film, don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.